Okay, so to start to create some more complex shapes with our volumes, what we're going to get into is the volume VOPs. So I'm just going to start by creating a sphere. So I'll control click my sphere right here. And I'll just call this noise. I'll dive inside of that. And then I'll use our sphere node that we have here. I'll drop down an ISO offset. Plug that in. Go ahead and name our field density. And I'll give it some more thickness or divisions here to give us some better shape here. And to start to get into adding some noise to this, we'll drop down a volume VOP. And we'll go ahead and plug in this first input here. And we haven't used these much in any of the past Nomin tutorials, so I'll go ahead and start talking about what these volume VOPs do a little bit better. Essentially what we get into is we get into manipulating these attributes, or and if we notice we have a density over here and we plug density over here. So if we just do that, that technically is telling Houdini to do nothing. But if we were to do something like plug our P, which is position, into density, we'll notice that we get something a little bit different. And it's a little bit hard to see here. So what I want to do is go into my display options right down here. Go into my background, go into my color scheme and go down to dark. Cool. So we can see here that it's taking the position X, so X going this way, and it's essentially putting those values into density. So essentially what it's doing here is this essentially just displaying us exactly that. So what we can do here is actually interchange a lot of these attributes with each other by doing some basic math. What we want in this specific example is AA noise. So we'll do tab anti-alias noise. We'll plug that in. And what we want to do here is to get this working, we'll go ahead and plug position into position. And then we'll go ahead and multiply that with our density. So we'll take the results of this, the density, and then we'll go ahead and plug that in. And you can see we're starting to get something that's a little bit hard to see. If we come in here to our AA noise and just bump up the amplitude just to see this a little better, we can start to see that we're starting to get a noise pattern here. And if I start to play with like the frequency, if I middle click here and start to go up and down, we can start to get more or less resolution. So I'll just set that to 4, 4, and 4. Cool. So what we can do is we can actually set this up in a way that is going to be very repurposable later on down the road. So if I want to have more control and throw control up on top right here, what we'll do is I'll jump inside of here. I'll go to my AA noise, and then what I can do right here is go all the way to the right to these little gizmo icons right here, and actually right click and promote these parameters. Left click promote. So it's getting a little right there, promote parameter right there. And what that's going to do is it's going to gray that out. And if we go up to the parent node, we're going to see that we have frequency right there. And now what we can do is middle click right here and control that a little bit better. If you notice, we're getting this really harsh edge right here. What we can do is before this ISO offset, we can drop down a volume blur. Go ahead and plug that in. Now we can see if we lower this a little bit, we can kind of soften up that edge. And now we come down to our volume VOP, we see a little bit of noise. And what's cool about this is that we can start to do things like this, where we can start to shape this, start to elongate it one way or another. So if we want some more wispy stuff with a little bit of extra detail, if we want it to be a little bit flatter, you can see we can start to get some pretty realistic looking stuff. Like this could be some mist coming off of, you know, a mountain or like a hill right here, some like rolling mist. And we can easily come back here and give it more detail with our ISO offset as well. So we can jump up to something like 200. Be really careful with this. It can go and get really, really heavy very, very quickly. Cool. I'll go ahead and drop this back down. A really good workflow that I like to do with controlling how much actual samples that we see here. So if we go down to 10, notice it's super bloppy. Go up to 100. This stuff can get really heavy really quick. So I like to use a workflow and Houdini using this take list right here. And essentially what this take list is essentially a way to store settings that we can then use at render time, whether that be rendering out a cache, rendering out a frame. We can do a ton of different stuff. So what I like to do here is I'll go to add take and I'll just do we'll just do final. So we got main right here, which is kind of like our working. Then we have final right here, which will be our final quality. So if we notice, if we go back to our ISO offset, our tab right here, our parameter, everything's grayed out. Why is that? Well, that's telling us that we haven't actually done anything to this. We haven't actually tweaked any values here. And if we go up to our take list as well, we'll see that there's nothing right over here, which means we haven't actually done anything. So if we go to our ISO offset, and if we right click right here and do include in take, now it ungrays out, we can see it, now we can manipulate it. So if we want to do up to something like 150, whenever maybe I can go ahead and hit escape, which will just go ahead and cancel that out. What I'll do is go to my take list and go to back to main. And now what that is essentially doing is that we have our working resolution, which can be whatever we want now. It can be, you know, 50, just to be something really, really lightweight. And then when we render it, we can actually swap something else. So what I'll do just to kind of show that off is I'll go to my offset. I'll make this a value of 10. And I'll go ahead and just drop down a camera. Go ahead and frame that up. Before we render, I'm just going to save this. So I'll just do save as. What I'm going to do is chapter 3. Then we'll do basics and we'll do noise. Great. So after we render this, I'll hit render. Our Mantra node will be created. If I go down to output, right there, we can see, as expected, we're seeing exactly that. Our render with take right now is currently set to just current, whatever we're actively on. But if we actually change this to over to final, and I'll just go ahead and hit render it again. What we'll see that is the more detailed version is going to show up. It's a little hard to see now just because the render quality is so low. And if I just come in here and turn off my preview, we'll see the buckets go, and we should see that a little bit more. Cool. So now we have our final quality set up. And the last thing I'm going to do in this lesson is jump back into my nodes and just kind of show off how we can now start to shape our volume a little bit better. So if we come up to our sphere, for example, and if we just drop down a mountain, we can easily come in here and get kind of like a good organic base. So something like that. And if we come all the way down in our network now, we'll see something a little bit more organic. And we can come up here. I'm just going to change the radius to 2 so we see it a little bit more. And then kind of come down in the height so it's a little bit more oval shaped. There we go. So now we're starting to get something that looks a little bit more organic. And you can see here, the more detailed we go with this, the more detailed that goes. To give us a little bit more control, because we're going to be using this guy later on, what we'll do is we'll come up here, we'll just start exposing a lot of these attributes. So we'll write left flip here, promote parameter, and we'll just do that with all of these. So those, and then when we come up here, we'll see that we have access to all these right here. So if we want less amplitude, it's very, very easy. We don't have to kind of dive back in and out. And if we want more detail with the roughness, we can do that. It's really cool is what we can do now is copy and paste this, and we can start daisy chaining this stuff. So we can do something like a lower frequency, which will give us some more high frequency noises. And if we come in here with our amplitude, we can kind of control that too. So starting to get into a lot of really good stuff. If we want to take these two results and kind of blend between the two, what we can do is drop down a volume mix, and then we have two different inputs. We can do this input, that input, and then we can do math between them. So we can do like multiply between them. We can do the inverse of them. We can do subtraction. So now we're really starting to get into some really kind of organic ways to control this stuff. So just come in here and play with a lot of these sliders can really help. Or what we can do is just simply blend between them. So we can do one or the other, so we can add in details that way. All right, cool. So in the next lesson, what we'll do is we'll start looking at how to create a better foundation, a better base shape for the volumes.